Good day, class. In this video, I'll demonstrate to you on how to sew garter shirts, and you will be performing the following competencies. First, you will be drafting the pattern. Second, you will lay out and pin the pattern, and after that, you will be cutting the fabric. Third, sew and assemble the shirt. And last but not the least, apply finishing touches on finished garments.
Let's begin pattern drafting. First, prepare the tools that we needed. We need French curve, triangle, hip curve, pencil, but here in the video I'll be using marker, tape measure, and manila paper. And next, we will be getting the measurement that we needed. So I'll be using 42 inches for the hip divided by 4, so that will be 10 and a half, plus 2 for the allowance, so that will be 12 and 1/2. Then I'm using 9 inches. That will be the length of my crotch and length of the short. So I prefer 15 inches for the length of the short. Next, let's draw perpendicular lines. So I measured 3 inches from the top of the paper and draw perpendicular line. Mark the center as point A and measure the length of the shirt. So I use 15 inches, mark it as point B, and measure the length of the crotch, mark it point C. Then draw a straight line from point C and point B. At this point, we will be using the 1/4 of hip measurement plus 2 inches. So that is 12 and a half. From point A, measure natin yung 12 and a half. Mark it as point D. Same din sa point A, 12 and a half ulit. Then mark it as point E. So same din sa letter C. From C, going to the left and right. 12 and a half pa rin. Same din sa point B, 12 and a half ulit. Going to the left and going to the right. Laging magmumula sa gitna. So mark this as point H and point I. And from point F, measure 3 inches and mark this as point G. From point G, measure 3 inches and mark it as point K. Next, from point E, measured 1 inch going to the right, mark this as point L, and from point L, kaya tayo ng 1 inch, mark it as point M. Next, connect natin yung E, F, and H. Same din sa D, G, and I. Connect natin with straight line. Next, from point H, measure 1 inch going to the left and mark it as point N. And from point I, measure to the right 1/2 inch and mark this as point O. Next, let's connect point J to point M. So as you can see, yung French curve naka-point sa point M. So ganyan po yung pag-connect. So I am using French curve and triangle. Next, let's connect the point J and point N using hip curve for the inseam. Next, let's connect point D and point K using French curve. So that will be the crotch of the front part. Next, let's connect point I and point O using hip curve. Let's connect point M and point D using straight line. So it is better to use hip curve here in this part, but then if you don't have choice, you have to connect it properly with straight line. Next, let's proceed to the adding allowances. So this will be the seam allowance. So on the crotch, I add 1/2 inch for the seam allowance for the crotch. Then add 1 inch allowance for the inseam. Then add 1 1/4 allowance for the bottom hemline. Same procedure, add 1 inch for the inseam. Then add 1/2 inch for the seam allowance on crotch. Then add 1 1/2 inches for the allowance on the waistline. So I will be adding garter here. So that's why I add 1 1/2 inches. If you're done in adding allowance, you may cut the pattern. Next, let's proceed in laying out the pinning pattern. So first, you have to check the fabric if it is facing the pattern on the wrong side. Make sure that you flatten the pattern. And make sure that you secure it using pin. So you have to flatten the pattern and the fabric at the same time. Then, cut the fabric. And may I remind you class that you are not allowed to leave the fabric while cutting. Cut the fabric with quick sharp stroke. Always use sharp shears in cutting the fabric to avoid wastage of materials. We will be transferring the sewing lines. So these are the sewing lines that we needed to transfer on the wrong side of the fabric. So I'll be using carbon paper. I'll just mark the other side of the short. After marking, make sure that you transfer the sewing line, but then it is advisable to use dressmaker carbon paper so that you can have a clean markings. Remember class that you should be preparing 2 pieces of short. Now let's proceed to sewing and assembling gartered shirts. First, you have to pin the bottom hem. So I fold it by 1/4 by 1 inch. After pinning it, you may sew it 1/16. Always start the sewing with back tuck or lock stitch. Next, sew the inseam by 1 inch. Always secure it with back tuck. Make it a habit to check if it is aligned and cut the excess threads after sewing. Next, let's edge the inseam. Do the same procedure in sewing the other side of the short. So after sewing the short, you have to invert right out the other side of the short, and after that, insert it inside the short. Observe the video how I do this step. In pinning the crotch, make sure that you align the inseam. Then, secure it using pin. In pinning the short, make sure that you align the edge of the short. Next, sew the crotch by following the sewing line. So the allowance from the edge is 1/2 inch. Next, let's edge the crotch. Be careful in edging the crotch and you might be cutting the other part of the short. Next, let's edge the waistline of the short. Next, prepare garter. So from the actual measurement of your waistline minus 3. So let's say my waistline is 32 minus 3. So I will be using 29 inches length of the garter. Then fold and pin the fabric following the sewing line. Next, sew the garter case 1/2 inch from the edge. Sewing the garter case, we leave a small opening so that we can insert the garter. So you may insert the garter using safety pin. At this point, I don't have safety pin here. After inserting the garter, you have to check if it is not twisted. If it is not twisted, you may sew the garter at both ends of the garter. You have to sew it 3 to 5 times. Next, close the small opening of the garter case. And let's proceed to the last part of sewing the gartered shirt, applying finishing touches. To check the excess threads, you have to invert out the garment. Start inspecting excess threads from top part of the short going to the bottom part of the short. Then invert it again and inspect again the excess threads, then cut. And this is the finished gartered shorts. Thank you for watching.